Hello and welcome back to Series 3, finally, of War Mysteries. Nothing's really changed. There's a lamp next to my head though.
Lamp's changed.
That's fine, lamp's new. We're going to be talking this season about World War I. So in the closing months of 1917, the First World War was still raging across Europe. While the fighting on the land was savage and relentless, the seas were no less dangerous.
This isn't the submarine one, is it?
No, maybe. In October of 1917, the HMS Drake, which was a Royal Navy cruiser, was torpedoed and sunk by Imperial German U-boat SMU-79. While SMU-106, which was another German U-boat of course, struck a mine and sank in the North Sea. U-96 was continuing to make a name for herself, raiding shipping lanes, eventually claiming 31 merchant ships by the end of the war, and 3 more damaged. She destroyed 9 ships in total from the 1st to the 9th of October alone. Amidst all this loud chaos, lingered a quiet rumour, however. One of a barge that was discovered aground on the northwestern coast of Brittany in France, with cargo intact but no trace of the crew. In the first episode of our World War I season, we will explore the fate of the Zebrina.
Looks lovely, that.
So, what do you? Let's start at the beginning. What do you know about World War I? Yeah, the beer's conveniently disappeared.
A lot of digging.
What do you mean, a lot of digging?
There was a lot of digging and dug trenches and trenched on either side.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fair enough. Yeah, a lot of digging. More broadly,
All started when what's his name got shot, the Archduke of Austro-Hungary.
yeah, Franz Ferdinand. Yeah, do you know who shot him?
The only thing I ever heard, it might be an urban legend, but was it Roald Dahl?
It was a Serb dissident by the name of
Serb.
Gavrilo Princip, who was a member of the Black Hand.
Like
Anyway.
that magic circle.
Nothing to do with the magic circle. Anyway, we're not technically looking into a submarine, we're looking into a schooner. Now, I'm fully prepared to admit that this picture is shit. Right. So that
Not even in the middle.
is the boat in question, which is the SV Zebrina. The Z. 3-masted schooner, 100 feet long.
That's
flat
like the picture
bottom.
of the boat they have in the box of matches. The ship matches.
Yeah, it might be similar.
What is it, a schooner?
Schooner, yeah.
Why such low quality? What's going on?
That's a photo of an identical boat. That's not actually the one.
So is that printing or is that an issue with the printer?
The printer's not doing very good at the minute.
Alright.
So that is an example of what a 3-masted schooner looks like.
Alright.
Now, this is a boat that you will find out in a moment, left Falmouth on October the 15th of 1917, carrying coal, Swansea coal, and it was going to be heading to northern France, a place called Saint-Brieuc, which is a relatively straight line. It's about 150 nautical miles away-ish.
Or if you go the other way, around the world, and come back on yourself.
A lot longer that way. Best way to introduce it all, bring it all together, is to look into our background. Even before the outbreak of World War I, coal constituted nearly 80% of Britain's exports by weight, and was a cornerstone of the British Empire's overseas trade. Throughout the war, and particularly toward the end, coal became the single most effective tool of the British forces that the German Republic could not counter. It therefore remained a decisive and ultimately war-winning asset. From almost the outset, both Britain and Germany possessed immense warships that could travel great distances, but only Britain could be sure of securing enough fuel and resources to make the return journey. German ships consequently found there were very few neutral coaling stations from which they could operate to the same degree. Supply was soon outstripped by demand.
This situation was not to improve in any meaningful way during the course of the conflict.
Obviously, the Royal Navy was the most powerful navy in the world in 1914. Everyone knew that. So Germany had a lot of shortages in the war. Cotton being another one. That's why most of the uniforms they had to make from, I think it was nettles. They'd get the strands of the nettles.
The fibres, yeah.
Yeah, the fibres.
Transporting this coal from the mines of Britain to the front lines of war was another matter, one accomplished in a number of ways, but most often with the use of cargo barges across the English Channel. One such barge, the Zebrina, is the subject of this particular mystery. Originally constructed in 1873 at Whitstable in Kent, England, the SV Zebrina was a schooner-rigged cargo vessel intended to be sent to South America for trade duties on the River Plate. She had 3 masts and was built in what was termed a coaster configuration, whereby she had a horizontally planed lower hull, giving a very shallow profile underwater. She had a total displacement of 189 long tons.
Built by hand, obviously. And it's 100 feet long, this boat. Massive, massive boat. A schooner rigged is a particular rigging of the masts. So they are attached to one another, but also attached to the fore of the boat. Okay. It's a bit of a tricky thing to explain. I wasn't really sure what a schooner was until I read a little bit about it. So it's 1873 it was built. It was intended to be sent to South America. So it was literally just going to be a cargo boat. And was built in what was termed a coaster configuration. So below the waterline, the bottom of the boat was almost completely flat.
Oh. So it didn't scrape?
Yeah, so coasters, obviously along coastlines there tends to be rocky outcrops, boulders and stuff underwater. These were designed to be able to go over them and thereby reach rivers, that kind of stuff.
So no sort of a keel underneath in any way?
There is a small one, but not much. It's very, very flat. And it was designed to carry cargo, basically. So you get more space inside the boat before it tapers off.
Zebrina only required 5 crew members to operate, and for a vessel of almost 100 feet in length and a significant span, was of a truly revolutionary design in the late 1800s. The original plan for Zebrina was for her to transport meat, as refrigeration techniques had improved by the late 1800s, and vast quantities of salt were no longer required to keep the meat fresh. Ice blocks, instead, were to be stored in her flat hull.
Most boats were still built like galleons or clipper ships where they had a big keel underneath.
Oh.
Because refrigeration techniques had improved by the late 1800s. Ice blocks that were planed into cubes were stored in a flat hull and hollowed out.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So put the meat,
fresh.
Yeah, put the meat inside the blocks of ice. Very clever. They didn't just shove it in salt anymore. That's what they used to do, prevent scurvy and all that. They used to store them in crates full of salt, didn't they? Meat. Cure it. They didn't need to do that anymore.
Cure it of what?
Her wartime service records are sporadic and far between, perhaps lost in the chaos of the war. But it is clear that she was requisitioned for coal transportation during the early war years. Around mid-October of 1917, the ill-fated voyage, for which she would become infamous, began.
Her wartime records, which obviously start in 1914, sporadic and far between. They're really tricky to find.
You've been looking?
Any information. I only found cemetery records of people that served on it. So it just said, this is the boat they're on.
Did you go and see their...
No.
No.
I didn't. So, built in 1873 in Kent, 100 feet long, designed to transport meat, was originally going to South America. To be honest, probably did, because there's a gap of, 40 good years between when it was built and when it was requisitioned for war, where we've got no idea where it was.
Probably moving meat around.
Most likely, yeah, it probably would have been used as its intended purpose. Now we know a little bit about the background of the... What is that? Oh, God. Now we know a bit about the boat, we'll look into actually what happened.
Zebrina left port at Falmouth, near Cornwall, England, on the 15th of October 1917. It's impossible to be exact about the departure time, as complete records do not appear to exist for this voyage. The ship was listed as carrying Swansea coal in a large quantity, the exact amount is also unknown, and was bound for Saint-Brieuc in France. She bore a crew of 5 men.
And those I do know. So there's J.A. Martin, couldn't find his first name. It just says J.A. Martin on his gravestone.
I think it's James.
Well, it could be Joseph, James, Joffrey.
Jim.
Well, Jim's short for James, isn't it? I thought James Albert, that sounded about right.
Jared!
He was the shipmaster and the captain. Don't know his age. But for that kind of experience, probably at least in his 40s. George Stewart, mercantile marine. He was the ship's mate, or second in command. He was 69.
Bit old.
Bit old.
Let's see.
W.H. Beck. Again, I'm not sure. I'm guessing William Howard. But no one seems to know. I can't find his first name, even on the death records. Again, a mercantile marine, and he was an able seaman. 26 years old. William Ferdinand Douglas Burke, another mercantile marine, and another able seaman, so just a ship hand. He was 17. And then Martin Faust, who was, again, mercantile marine, able seaman, and he was 31. So those were the 5 listed crewmen on the boat.
In a straight line, the total distance was around 150 nautical miles to travel from Falmouth Port to the docks at Saint-Brieuc. But of course, a sail ship propelled solely by means of wind would have to travel very much further, due to the need to tack the ship into the wind depending on its direction. In this manner, a journey of such distance might be tripled or even quadrupled, and during a time of war would leave the sail ship vulnerable to attack for very much longer than a steam or piston-powered vessel. Very little is known of the journey itself. On October 17th, the Zebrina was spotted off the coast of northwest France, seemingly adrift. It was noted to be moving across the shallows under wind power, and thanks to the flat hull, was not damaged by any of the coastal rocks beneath the surface. These waters were still very dangerous, however, patrolled by German attack ships and U-boats, and a schooner would have made for a very easy target. Later that day, however, Zebrina was discovered run aground on Brazil Point, south of Cherbourg, and was completely undamaged. All 5 crew members, however, had disappeared without a trace.
So, see if I can find.
Mind the set.
Yeah, all right. Why the pine cone? Never mind. I'm not going to get an answer, am I? Right.
Yeah, right.
So essentially, it was beached, but in good condition. The cargo was intact in the hold, untouched. The hold was sealed.
All the coal's in there then?
Yep, all the coal is still on board, in good order. The mess hall, which is below decks obviously, was set for breakfast for 5 people.
That was a right mess.
And was undisturbed. So there wasn't anything cooking and on fire or anything, it was just the place settings were out for 5 people.
Had the honey nut loops out, bowl of milk.
All that.
Croissant.
Yeah, probably not. Croissant.
France, so...
Yeah, but they come from England. I don't think it works like that. The ship's log, most important of all, was still on the bridge. So it didn't report anything out of the ordinary. In fact, it didn't report anything at all. It just listed the departure on October 15th, not even a time.
Hasn't bothered to write in it?
No.
Partying.
They haven't written anything in it.
Partying.
Probably.
Did they have a drink on board?
Well, they would have had stuff in the mess hall, yeah.
Yeah, all bit out there, that was all gone.
Possibly. Couldn't tell you, wasn't on board the ship. Anyway, all 5 crew members had disappeared without a trace. So, set sail on the 15th of October, scoots its way across the English Channel. Something happens, which we can look into. Ends up beached on Roselle Point 2 days later. Crew aren't on board. Nothing's damaged. Nothing's out of place. Ship's log is still on the bridge.
Breakfast is ready.
But, well, the place settings are out.
It's ready.
Basically. Just needs food putting on.
Which is cornflakes.
Yeah. Whatever. Probably not cornflakes.
Weetabix.
that's pretty much it. It's ended up stuck on the beach, no crew.
That's it. That's the mystery.
Yeah. What happened to the crew? What do you think happened to the crew?
Partying. Well, I don't know. What do you mean? What happened?
Partying
To them? They must have
and-
fell in the water.
Well, all 5 of them. Never mind. Let's get into some of their theories. Starting with the big obvious one, U-boat attack.
Unsurprisingly, the strongest theory at the time was that Zebrina was in some way engaged by a German U-boat. Several are known to have patrolled the channel at the time of Zebrina's crossing, though no vessel survived the war that claimed to have attacked her. At the end of January 1917, Germany announced that its U-boats would be engaging in unrestricted warfare, allowing them free rein to attack any and all vessels on sight, and without warning.
No, that was bad.
Yeah. So before that, U-boats preferred to attack large ships with torpedoes. They only had a limited number of these torpedoes, so sometimes they would surface and attack with their deck gun and just blast holes in the ship on the waterline and then sink. But by doing so, what they had to do is fly a flag first to say, we're an enemy, we're going to attack you. Basically abandon ship because we're going to blow your boat up.
What colour's the flag?
It would have been the German Republic flag. So this is who we are. Get off your boat.
What if they then put up a white flag?
Well, that's different. That's the prize law, which is what happened before unrestricted warfare. They would surrender, and then
I see.
the boat and its cargo would be forfeit. The Germans could do what they want with it.
It is entirely possible that Zebrina was indeed engaged by a submarine, or even an enemy ship. Reports of entire crews taken prisoner before their ship was scuttled were widespread and numerous during the First World War, and cargo vessels or merchant ships were a high priority target, denying the enemy force valuable and vital resources. Zebrina would outwardly have represented just such a vessel. It was standard procedure for German warships and U-boats at the time to seize the log of a target ship as a way of confirming the kill. This was not done in the case of the Zebrina. The log remained undisturbed on the bridge. Given that she was discovered entirely undamaged just 2 days after leaving England, whatever transpired in the Channel would surely have occurred relatively quickly, as the ship log did not mention anything amiss, which would seem to indicate a lack of response time.
No vessel survived the war that claimed to attack her. So if they were attacked by a U-boat,
Nobody admitted it.
well, no, because they kept records. Any U-boats that survived the war brought the ship's logs back of the boats that they destroyed. So they surface, aim their gun, basically say surrender, and they take the crew off the boat as prisoner, then destroy the boat. That is what they say may have happened here. Big wooden boat, sails, slow, going across the English Channel from England or whatever to France. It's obviously going to be transporting supplies. It's not armed, or at least they can't see that it's armed.
Sitting duck.
It was believed at the time that a German boarding party might have seized the Zebrina, imprisoning her crew in the U-boat, but may then have been attacked by an Allied warship or submarine, forcing them to quickly abandon the ship untouched. Being a flat-hulled boat, torpedoes would have very little chance of striking her, and this again may explain why she was found completely undamaged, cast adrift, while the Germans attempted to escape. U-boats of the time would take between 15 and 30 minutes to complete a safe dive, and crash dives were extremely risky. The theory also concluded that the U-boat was unsuccessful in its evasion. Since the Zebrina crew were not seen nor heard from again, it was assumed they were killed with the U-boat crew when it was engaged and destroyed.
So this is an example of a Type 93, which is what would most likely have attacked the Zebrina if this is true. There's its deck gun.
Yeah.
There's the flag. Now, an example of one of those operating in that time is U-96. And that is just June to, or when it was deployed, to August 1918 when the war ended. That's the number of boats it destroyed in that time. And look at October. 1st to the 9th, they took out all those ships.
Busy, weren't they?
Yeah, keen.
Busy.
Very keen. And that's just an example. Again, there were loads of these U-boats operating, but that's just one. I found some reports online which will help with this theory a bit. This is a report that I found. Again, I'll put this up here for our viewers. This picture here shows World War I U-boat wrecks. The 1919 list is essentially a compilation of all the U-boats that were known to have been sunk in the Channel and the Atlantic as well. We don't really look at that. This is obviously the English Channel. So all of these boats that you see here, with names or otherwise, were all missed. So we know they're there now, but in 1919 they couldn't account for them. They didn't know where they were. And back then, that list was something like 48% accurate. So obviously wreck divers and stuff have found these boats since. Now, the one we're interested in is this one here. So Falmouth is up here, Zebrina is down here, and then there's this World War I U-boat. We don't know what boat it is, but if you plot them on a map, if they were attacked by a U-boat and that U-boat was then very quickly sunk, that's the most likely candidate. I actually found that myself, so I'm quite proud of that.
Well done. Did you draw that?
I didn't. We know there is a U-boat down there, it's just unidentifiable. So they've found it, they just don't know which one it was.
I should have read the name.
Well, the ship's bell. But they obviously couldn't find it. That's the strongest prevailing theory then, at the minute.
Okay, that's a good theory.
It's good.
I have to disprove that.
So it's quite a strong theory, but there are others. The next one being that the crew abandoned ship.
This second theory was wildly unpopular at the time, given the sense of national pride and resilience among the British people, but also the lack of evidence. It was postulated that the crew of the Zebrina might have abandoned ship during the crossing of the Channel, possibly close to France, where they could reach land more easily. No records survive which would indicate whether or not the Zebrina carried any lifeboats or escape rafts, nor whether these were missing from the ship upon its discovery. Why the men would abandon their post is not clear. The safety of Britain compared to northern France would seem to be reason enough never to set a foot aboard the ship in the first place, were one of mind to flee the war. Additionally, one of the crewmen was almost 70 years of age, and would almost certainly have perished in open water.
What do you think of that one? No? I don't think so. Who jumps off of a boat, you know, they've got all their food, everything. Wait till you get to France, then bugger off. Or just go somewhere else. Not buying that one.
Maybe they were never on the boat in the first place. They just floated over there.
They're on it. Let's sign the name, don't they? Manifest. We're missing. Jesus. Ugh. So we're pretty sure that they didn't jump off the boat in the middle of the English Channel, because that would be really dumb. So, the next theory then, one I didn't really expect. Piracy.
Something little considered when discussing the First World War is the proliferation of piracy, a scourge that at once was endorsed and detested by many nations involved. From the outset of the war, a number of older model cruisers and corvettes, and even sail vessels, were outfitted with hidden passageways between decks, secret compartments, and even cleverly concealed naval guns.
Did you know that there were pirate ships going around during World War I? I didn't.
I thought just Somalians did it. Oh, and Captain Hook.
I had no idea. Obviously, in my head, I've got this, you know, clipper ship or a galleon or whatever with a bunch of blokes hobbling around with a wooden leg going, we'll fucking get them or whatever. But it's not really like that, is it?
Perhaps the most famous example of a genuine pirate raiding ship from World War I is the Sea Adler, literally Sea Eagle, or white-tailed eagle. This ship, specifically modified to conduct ambush-style raids against all manner of enemy sea vessels, was captained by Felix Graf von Luckner. His crew were known as the Kaiser's Pirates, Over a number of months, the Sea Adler attacked a number of merchant ships, often luring them in with distress signals and then revealing their 5-inch deck gun. It is possible that the Zebrina fell prey to such raiders, but it was typical for pirates to destroy the vessels that they plundered, and often to steal their cargo. No records survive from the war to confirm or deny this theory.
I suppose a boat would have a white tail coming off the back of it.
I guess so. I thought it might have been the sails, but
wake. No,
yeah.
it won't be the
Well,
sails.
maybe. Yeah, maybe.
It won't be the sails. Luring them in and then revealing their 5-incher.
They were very clever, actually. The ship's mate, they were all men on board, obviously, but the ship's mate pretended to be the captain's wife, put on a wig, put on a hat, a dress. They started small fires in pans below decks to make it look like the ship was on fire, and they'd shout and lure people in. And as soon as they got close, they'd knock down wooden barricades, and there'd be this whacking great naval cannon aimed at the boat, and they'd shout, surrender. They were quite successful. We're not necessarily saying it was the Sea Adler, but it may have been a similar ship. There were many, many pirate ships operating at the time. Anyway, so what do you think of that one? Pirate ship.
No, I'm not as keen on that one. I mean, to start off with, they were nowhere near Somalia, so the chances of them getting a pirate situation are slim. And then also, if it is pirates, why do they leave all the coal on board? Probably take the crockery and the cutlery that was left out for their Weetabix.
I don't think they had Weetabix back then.
Or whatever the equivalent was then. Shredded wheat or whatever.
Bread, I guess.
Water biscuits.
So, piracy, maybe. I think it's reasonably plausible, but I still think not quite there. The last theory that we're going to look into, which is another one that I hadn't really expected, but kind of knew something about thanks to the Second World War, is that Zebrina may have been a Q ship.
This theory circulates around the idea that Zebrina was a decoy or bait ship. These vessels were specifically modified, not unlike the raiding ships mentioned previously. Q ships, as they were formerly known, were often heavily armed with hidden guns, armoured beneath the hull, and manned by a great deal more crew than one would expect for a ship of their size. They were also designed to lure submarines to the surface in order to attack, and then to consequently overpower them. Given the losses suffered by the various nations on the open seas during the war, it would not be surprising to use such apparently weaker sailing ships as decoy vessels, which would outwardly appear to be completely defenceless against well-armed submarines. There is anecdotal evidence that Zebrina may indeed have been one of these Q ships.
So, Zebrina was a big ship. It's possible that they hid crew below decks.
And was there any way to identify it as a Q ship?
Normally there would be an entry in the Lloyd's shipping registry, because it was a cargo ship before it was a warship.
Okay.
If it was converted, there might be an entry in there. There isn't. In fact, Zebrina isn't even in the Lloyd's shipping register that I can find, because certain records are locked from certain dates.
Could you
Annoying.
get a membership and unlock it?
You could at the Q, ironically. The National Archives in Kew Gardens.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There was no evidence of heavy weaponry reported, but some wartime documents, I don't know where these are, I've only read that other people have read them, so I don't know how true this is, apparently suggest that there were in fact up to 23 men on board when it left Falmouth, which is, 18 more than she needed.
More than the ones we know about.
Yeah. Well, gun crews on, not so much battleships, but gun crews on, say, smaller cruisers or attack ships.
Frigate.
Yeah, they generally have a 3-man team per gun. And obviously 18 divides quite neatly by 3. 3 sixes.
Yeah.
So that would indicate that she would have 6 guns, if true.
Who's doing sailing then?
The other 5.
Oh, yeah.
Now, obviously, that cargo bay could have been filled with artillery shells or
Coconuts.
probably not coconuts. They don't do much against submarines.
Cornish fudge.
Q-ship crews were a special arm of the Navy, and their disappearance from the boat may not necessarily have spelled their doom.
They may have just disembarked.
No, nobody heard about them from a later date. They didn't turn up in Paris or Calais anywhere.
Nope.
Anything like that. Right.
No. So that's
It's proper mystery then this week.
proper mystery.
Full on.
So essentially, all we've got to go on is a boat on a beach.
Do we know they got on the boat in the first place?
The crew manifest says they did, but whether they got on their own or with 18 other men or women.
Well, it's a nice mystery in that it's quite contained.
Yeah, nice one to open the season with. So what do you think, personally, out of those? So you've got U-boat,
Me.
piracy, abandoning ship, or Q-ship. I think U-boat.
Yes,
Because
probably
evidence.
U-boat.
There's
probably the U-boat bit then.
There's a bit more to it. There's a bit more to look into. You can analyse where ships were sunk.
They might have just got halfway over in the water and they just decided, can't bother with this. This is doing my head in, and all agreed, especially the
Surrendered,
70-year-old. And no, just let it go on the rocks.
Just
It's
let
got
it.
a low bottom. It can go right up to the edge of the tide, crest, or whatever it's called, and then they can just then bugger off in advance.
Maybe they left the ship's log there so that whoever found it would think, oh, hang on, if they were attacked, the ship's log would have been taken. Maybe it was their way of leaving a little sign.
Shame, because you get a killing for that now. Did they run off?
They might have done. Maybe. Where would they run to though? It's France, in the middle of war. Big war. War of attrition. War to end all wars.
I thought it was World War One.
It was war, yeah.
Good.
Great war.
It went great. Well, they may have just done one. And sick of it. Can't be doing with all this World War One nonsense. Although, cushy job, to be fair. Cushy job, because working on a boat with coal. Could be in the trenches, so...
So the conclusion then is that they were attacked by a U-boat.
In all likelihood, the crew encountered a U-boat. The time during which the incident occurred came at a feverish point in the war, and during a particularly intense month for surprise attacks at sea. As previously mentioned, U-96 was holding nothing back during early October, and unrestricted naval warfare had been rife throughout the Channel for many months. Zebrina, large as she was, and with so few apparent crew aboard, would have presented a handsome target. Large vessels were typically preferred over smaller boats for the simple reason that they would likely be carrying a great deal more cargo. A draconian logic, but highly effective. German naval commanders at the time were wary of Q-ships, but a lack of surviving photographic evidence of the Zebrina itself makes such a theory weaker, since it cannot be ascertained that she carried armament of any kind, and certainly none were listed in her loadout manifest. Couple this with her flat hull, which would have been extremely difficult to damage with a torpedo, the relative busyness of the Channel, gorged as it was with heavily armed ships, the advent of armed convoys, and the rapidly increasing attrition rate of U-boats toward the end of the war. The narrative is rather clear. Zebrina very likely encountered a hostile submarine, was boarded, her crew taken prisoner, and was unable to be scuttled for whatever reason.
So they boarded, took the crew, something appeared. Wouldn't have been a warplane at that point, wouldn't have been a seaplane because they weren't operating for carriers. So it would more than likely have been another submarine, or more likely a warship, frigate, something. Yeah, pretty much. 15 to 30 minutes to dive, unless they crash dived. Some U-boats at that time were able to do it, some weren't. You just blow the tanks, but it was very dangerous. Still is. I don't think submarines crash dive anymore, actually. Haven't since the 70s. I don't know why. So that's that.
It does, I suppose, it makes sense that there was a U-boat involved.
I didn't even know until I looked into all this, really, that the Germans were even operating U-boats during the First World War. They're quite sophisticated bits of equipment. So, yeah. In a nutshell, left Falmouth. Something happened. Probably a U-boat attack. And they disappeared and were never recovered. Never found. Never returned to England. And, you know, it's sad for the families, but they were lost in the madness of what was going on. You know, the damage caused by the war was far beyond the 1910s and 1920s.
Often termed a war of attrition, World War I claimed somewhere between 15 and 22 million lives from all combat theatres, while a further 23 million were wounded. Fought in an age where killing as many of the enemy as possible was still a normal tactic of warfare, and even considered a priority, the staggering scale of the destruction, coupled with the overwhelming loss of life, caused long-lasting, generation-spanning damage to much of the developed world. Of these casualties, almost 6 million people disappeared completely in the chaos. No bodies recovered, lost forever in the post-war turmoil, with no closure for their families. This number has remained relatively untouched by the passage of time. The crew of the Zebrina represent just 5 of that number, tasked with working a 4-decades-old ship with a somewhat menial role, delivering coal to France. However, they crossed one of the most dangerous stretches of water of their time, during an all-encompassing conflict that was ravaging the world. Their total disappearance meant 5 more families would have to deal with the anguish and uncertainty of their fate, a bitter legacy for succeeding generations to endure, and ultimately, the story of their end crushed by the colossal aftermath and the unfathomable millions of dead. Perhaps worst of all, their sacrifice would go unnoticed for decades, a tiny voice lost in the orchestra of destruction that was the war to end all wars.
Another submarine, though.
It's always a submarine involved. It's a thing.
It's nice to start the series without anybody burning to death. And
Well, they drowned, didn't they? If our theory is correct.
or got eaten on a German submarine.
So, what do you guys think? What do you think happened to Zebrina? Do you think they were attacked by a U-boat? Do you think pirates got them? Do you think they just got to France and had enough? Wandered off to get a croissant? That's what he thinks. Whatever you think, let us know in the comments down here.
Obviously the virus has made things challenging. It is nice to be back for Series 3.
It's been a long time coming. So thank you again for watching. It's always good to be back. We're going to be bringing some more episodes your way in the next couple of months. Hopefully between now and spring. If you have anything you'd like to suggest, any comments, any questions, obviously feel free to put them down below. We'll do our best to answer. It will probably be me because I don't think he knows how to use YouTube. Anyway, it's been good fun. Nice to see you all again. We'll catch you in our next episode. Be sure to tune in. He will. I definitely will. Another submarine.
How for now?
Jesus Christ, it's like rotting flesh. It really is.